Good morning, everybody. I was just worried for a moment, Conchita, you're going to say it's not finished until the fat lady sings, so I was a little bit worried about that. My 20 or so South African colleagues there at the back, I think we're all feeling a lot more comfortable because they always accuse us of African time, but I've now seen a little bit of Italian time, which I think is very similar to what we used to, and I think we feel right at home. It's nice to be in Italy. I come for the friendly people, but most importantly for the wonderful food. So thank you for inviting me. My day job, Conchita spoke a little bit about my hobbies, so to speak, that sounds as if I'm a regulator, but my day job is really as a non-executive director. So for all practical purposes, at the moment in South Africa, I work in the trenches in very difficult situations where the world economy and the national economy is going through some really tough times, and I'm sure you know that as well. And you try to save companies, improve companies, change companies. You spoke about agility and the ability to adapt, and you try to save and create new jobs. And when we talk about this topic, I would like to make it really practical, and I just want to see how this thing works. Okay. So just really practical from what I've seen in South Africa. And in South Africa, if I just give you a little bit of our perspective on integrated reporting, for us it's not a debate anymore. We adopted integrated reporting for South African listed companies. Our stock exchange brought it into our rules 10 years ago. So we've got 10 years of experience of integrated reporting in South Africa, not just for listed companies, but also for the state-owned enterprises. And a lot of other companies outside that, private companies, tend to do integrated reporting. Before that, there were pockets of ESG. Marco, you spoke about ESG, which is an element of that. He talks about the environmental, the social side of that. But integrated reporting has been around in South Africa for a long time. You see a lot of integrated reporting happening under the Fortune 500 or so group of companies, multinationals. My colleague from South Africa, Mervyn King, told me last week that he's now gone to 2 or 3 different places across the globe, India, Australia, elsewhere, where they've opened a whole department or schools at universities where they specifically teach integrated reporting. So it's not in many places a foreign concept. It's not in many places an academic concept. It's a reality. And I therefore want to share a little bit with you about why. And there was quite a bit of talk about we need rules and we need frameworks and we need reporting standards and we need to work that into policy and so on. Let's call it the compliance side of things. Must we put rules in place, or must we just wait for companies to do that? And that's really what I would like to share a little bit on, whether we need the carrot. Is there a carrot? Is there a motivation for companies to actually want to do reporting beyond just financial information? And if so, is there something in it for CFOs? Why would you even sell this, promote this, if there's nothing in it for you? If there's something in it for you, what is the role that you play? As soon as you can see the benefit, then automatically you would be willing to play the role that you think you have to play. Or is it purely a stick because it sounds like a nice theoretical academic thing to do because the world is moving on, because some or other regulators got an idea and it's going to cost you a lot of extra money and time and resources to actually implement it? Because if it's a stick and it's a grudge purchase, you'll do it to comply, but you'll probably do the bare minimum. My personal view, and coming from a developing economy where we fight for foreign investment because we compete with all of you, we compete with all of the other developing countries, we compete with everybody else across the African continent. It is really important that foreign investors understand our company. It's really important that we prepare financial statements using a set of standards that everybody understands. That's why we've adopted IFRS. But it's also really important that foreign investors and institutional investors and the big pension funds and the Scandinavian sovereign funds and the big investors of the world can look at our reporting and understand what our companies are about. Because without that, they don't understand us. And one of you, I think you mentioned that, Fernando. Without that, if they don't understand what we're about, if they don't understand our leadership, what our views are on the environment, what our views are on treating labor, what our views are on giving back socially into the communities and being a responsible corporate social citizen, they're not going to invest in us. Their money will flow elsewhere. And without foreign investment, our companies cannot survive, our companies cannot expand, and it's really, really important to our economy. In the same way, and we've heard some economists and so on speak earlier on, and we heard the guy from Standard & Poor, we do need that investment. So for us in South Africa, it is to report beyond just numbers, to report just beyond financial information is not a luxury, it's not a decision, it's not a debate, it's inevitable. It has to happen. It becomes our social license to operate. If you operate in the mining industry, for argument's sake, you cannot just provide financial information. You have to explain what the laws are that influence you, how that impacts the social side of your business, and all of those things. So it's really your social license to operate. And I've certainly seen in the companies that I'm involved that investors don't just want reporting on financial numbers, but we refer to it as the 3 Ps. In other words, the profit side of things, but also the planet and the people. And that's what they're interested in. A lot of international investors and investor groups have already developed their own measurements on how they measure companies and the company reporting before they decide to put their money in. The International Corporate Governance Network, and there are many of those. There are even subcategories on stock exchanges where you can be rated, your social investment can be rated, and you get an index so that you can, companies have a number or a rating so that investors can decide if they want to invest in them. It's not just about investors, it is also about the communities that we're involved in, the people that work for us, our suppliers, our customers, and regulators. And you know as well as I do that transparency is very important when it comes to where do you get your products. Did you get it ethically? Were there child labor involved? What is the carbon footprint of importing from wherever you import your supplies or your content of your product, the origin of that, your labor practices, all of those things are important to customers, are important to your suppliers, and are important also to the people that work for you. So we see these days extensive recalls of pharmaceutical products, of motor vehicles, because of not the money, whether the companies are making money, because of the safety issues, the unethical practices, and so on. So the world has moved there. That information, it's not debatable if people want it. People are asking for that information. And that's why I'm not a big proponent of making this a rule. I think it is inevitable. Companies have to do it. Without that, you won't compete. Without that, you just don't give enough information so that your investors and your customers and your clients and your suppliers can make decisions about who you are. I think it's important that there was quite a bit of talk about the rules and the standards, and I think it's useful that there are already lots of standards out there. There's the International Integrated Reporting Framework, Conchita referred to it. There's the GRI, you looked at the GRI standards. There are lots of frameworks that you can use, but I believe it's very important that you don't box a company into using a framework, because as soon as you do that, you just start ticking off all the little criteria instead of actually telling your story. And we've certainly seen in South Africa, companies are telling their story, what they're about, what their strategy is about, how they manage the company, not just to make money, because you as CFOs know your financial capital doesn't sit in one building, and your manufactured capital and your intellectual capital and your human capital somewhere else. As a CFO, you have to manage all of those things together in an integrated fashion. And that is the story that you need to tell in your reporting. And it must really be driven, and it should be driven by what your stakeholders want to know about you, what your investors, what your labor force, what your regulators want to know about you. And that will really determine what you put in the report. So the frameworks will assist you, but the story should be your unique story. It's your investment case, really. The role of the CFO, and that's my final comment, if you see the benefit of this, if you can see how it's going to make your job better, you have to do all of those things. You have to not just manage the financial capital, but you refer to what about labor, and what about your workforce, and what about your client base or your supplier base, and all of those things as a CFO, you have to understand. You have to understand so that you can drive value, so that you can create sustainable value with the rest of the management team or the leadership team for that business. So if you can get involved in reporting, to report you first have to gather the data, understand the data. So if you can gather that data, understand it, you're much more well-informed to make better decisions, and then reporting just follows. What we've certainly seen in South Africa is the CFOs, because you're in the business of putting numbers together and your business of gathering data, and you've got internal reporting processes, to start adding other elements of reporting, non-financial data, environmental data, labor, etc., to bold it onto your process is actually not that difficult. And once you start understanding your information better, you start making better business decisions internally, you start communicating and reporting better externally, and all of that really adds to building trust in your company, not just from your investors, but also from this wider range of stakeholders that are important to you. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. Thanks, Conchita.